In 2002, in a speech in Chicago, Tony Blair set out the Bush-Blair doctrine of intervention and the right to protect of the major powers, the international community, to intervene into the domestic affairs of a country if it should endanger its population, if that is, the government should attack its own people. This almost inevitably led to an intervention at some point in the future where Western forces would be engaged in war fighting to remove a brutal dictator. And the other reasons for this may have been lost in the transport the movement of history. But this led to Iraq, the second Iraq War, because of Saddam Hussein's flagrant non-submission and non-compliance to UN mandates, arguably in Tony Blair's view. Now, whether Iraq was legal or not is not to be debated in this video, but it does set out, as I said in my videos on political conventions becoming laws in written constitutions, it set out that Tony Blair's speech became a political convention. Then Iraq set a precedent that it had happened through power of the Western powers, and the military power intervening in the domestic affairs of another country, and thus it became a UN law, a part of the UN's constitution, and the right to protect, the duty to protect, has now become firmly entrenched with the next intervention in Libya. Does Colonel Gadaffi have any legal protection under the law? Well, the moratorium on assassination of head of states came from the fact that many heads of states in the 19th century, such as American presidents and British prime ministers, were assassinated by assassins claiming for various reasons, liberty, equality, or for anarchism or communism, or the being against the emancipation of slavery. There are many different reasons and no common thread, but and no common conspiracy. But there were many different assassinations, and this moratorium against assassination under international law was set out to protect people from the changing fortunes of wars, where the opposing governments could effectively assassinate the entire government of a losing side. This was not intended, though, to protect despots, I'm sure, from the Western powers' point of view in the 19th century, with their liberal focus overall, a broad liberal and social understanding of what liberty and equality actually meant. The rule of law and democracy were all firmly entrenched by the 19th century, although not everyone had the right to vote. Now, in the case of Colonel Gadaffi, he is not a legitimate head of state. He's never claimed himself to be president. He was the orchestrator and enactor of a military coup 40 years ago in the 1970s, where he overtook the former monarchy and placed himself as the head of a political system. He's never appointed a president, but never claimed that he was president himself. Therefore, is he head of state, or is he merely a colonel in the Libyan army and thus a legitimate target? Well, many in the Westminster have argued that if it's placement that is the reason for him being assassinated, if it was to happen, for instance, if he was in a command post or in a tank on the front line giving a speech to his troops, for instance, or conducting military operations from a command structure, a command bunker, and it was hit by a JDAM weapon or some other weapon fired from an Allied plane, and we are called the Allies again, thank God, because of the involvement of the entire European Union and the United States, and for once we are running straight along equal train lines here. Well, I believe that Gadaffi, arguably the entire Bin Laden crime family and the entire Saudi Arabian royal family are all legitimate targets. Why? Because they do not have legitimacy. Because they were not elected. They are feudalistic crime families. The whole Gadaffi family is a crime family. Libya is not fighting a civil war. Libya is fighting a revolution. A revolution that is set out to remove the the Gadaffi crime family, and to cause the collapse of a criminal mafia regime which has took billions and billions out of the Libyan economy for their own personal gain, just as the Bin Ladens have, just as the ANC have in South Africa, just as Mugabe has, and just as the Saudi royal family has. Now, arguably, the Saudi royal family argue that they are building a country, but the wealth is not distributed equally in any way. They're a crime family, and just because they put the aspects of royal in front of their name does not give them any more protection. This is why it is perverse and absurd to go to the Arab League and ask for their backing as though it was legitimate, when most of the Arab League and are backed up either by Saudi Arabia, which is a feudalistic crime family, or Iran, a totalitarian Islamic republic, as Mainoun 1999 said, or Jeremy said, in his video on Libya, on Libyan airstrikes. What has been pushing this through is Britain and France, and what William Hague said was quite encouraging, that we are in now a strong enough position, the Europeans and Americans, that is because of the decrease, the killing of over 60% of the Bin Laden crime family's senior operatives in Afghanistan, not only those in Afghanistan, not those anywhere else, through drone strikes, that we are able to now prosecute a wider war and wider interventions against anyone who oppresses their democratic rights of their people. For instance, Mugabe, Julius Malema and Jacob Zuma could soon be on the hit list, and even Saudi Arabia itself has not been ruled out. There was no mention by Hague that Saudi Arabia specifically would be spared. But I disagree with Mainoun 99 that Saudi Arabia would not be attacked by the European Union. The European Union is very clever. The European Union could do a revolution in Saudi Arabia without ever having to intervene. But would that not itself be an intervention? Now, the difficulty is the conflict between Saudi Arabia and Iran. We don't want to take away the support that other countries are getting from Saudi Arabia only to find that we have a totalitarian Iran. It's not a choice between a brutal monarchy or a totalitarian regime, but a choice between Western democracy or absolute chaos continuing in the Middle East. As we've seen, Israel and the Palestinians are at it again, bombing each other and killing each other. This must stop, and it must be forced to be stopped by the Americans and the Europeans. Hillary Clinton was again pandering to the Israeli lobby, and she must be stopped from doing this. Her position, particularly, is very perilous, because she is very close to the Saudi Arabian royal family in a community of interest, but also very close to the Israeli lobby. What we must do is decouple ourselves and have no economic or political connections with these people, and finally put them 6 feet underneath the ground.